from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, more sanctions, the U.S. upping the pressure on Putin and those closest to him. We will bring you the latest from the White House. Plus, how the war in Ukraine is affecting its world-renowned tech sector. We're going to talk to two engineers who've been helping their employees stationed across Ukraine about how it's going down. And more than $1 billion in losses for Grab this last quarter. I'll speak with President Ming Ma about how he plans to turn it around. All that in a moment, but first I want to get a look at the markets. Another day of stocks swinging between gains and losses as the conflict in Ukraine escalates. Our Ed Ludlow here with the latest, and Ed, tech actually the underperformer.
Yeah, tech the underperformer. There's no clear driver of sentiment other than the market trying to digest what is happening in Ukraine, the repercussions of sanctions, particularly financial and energy sanctions on Russia. You see the S&P 500 down 0.5 percentage point, and the NASDAQ 100, very tech-heavy index, well, look, tells the story, right? Much more significant losses, down 1.5%. At the same time, you have crude oil, WTI West Texas Intermediate, jumping to $116 per barrel, then pulling back. We're at about $107.67 per barrel. At one point, of course, that was the highest level since 2008, or highest price since 2008. And the US 10-year yield hovering around 1.85%. A lot to take on board ahead of a really important jobs data print this Friday, where we focus back on the outlook for rates. We don't often do this in the show end, but I want to look at the debt markets, and in particular Yandex. Come with me into my Bloomberg terminal, because this is important. Yandex, of course, a Russian search engine, their version, I guess, of Google. They paid a coupon payment due Thursday on their dollar bonds, and it's important because this is really the first example we've had of a foreign currency coupon payment by a company that's headquartered in Russia, a company headquartered in Russia and, of course, subject to financial sanctions. And, you know, it's really set a precedent of what we could see from Russian corporates that have issued dollar bonds, a really important moment for the market. And a market, let's be honest, Em, that you and I don't cover as often, but really on this occasion worth looking at. Again, I talked about how tech was the underperformer in equity markets on Thursday. You look at some of the names on the board there, Amazon down big, Tesla Inc. down big, Microsoft down big. A big part of the discussion is working out what the sales exposure of these companies is to Russia. But friend of the show, Dan Ives of Wedbush, actually has a research note out Thursday saying, even in the worst case scenario, the sales exposure of these companies is about 1 to 2 percentage points in the worst case scenario. So interesting that tech's down so much with a big jobs print coming Friday where we think again about the Fed. You do wonder if the market's kind of already looking beyond the situation in Ukraine and has the economy and the outlook for rates in mind.
All right, Ed, thanks for that. Meantime, President Biden says the United States will sanction 8 wealthy Russians and their families, including President Vladimir Putin's press secretary, and limit the travel of 19 others along with their families.
Today, I'm announcing that we're adding dozens of names to the list, including one of Russia's wealthiest billionaires, and I'm banning travel to America by more than 50 Russian oligarchs, their families, and their close associates.
The West working to raise the pressure on the Russian president and those closest to him. Our Anne-Marie Horder has more now from the White House. Anne-Marie, just how much more pressure will this put on Putin?
Well, we just don't know yet, but the strategy is to put pressure on the financial assets of these Russian elites and businessmen, the mega rich of Russia, to try to see if they could potentially move the dial in Putin's calculus to get him to withdraw in his invasion of Ukraine. But given the fact that he already spoke to Emmanuel Macron today, and then he left that call not thinking that that was going to be possible. We did hear the president talk about he's going after the richest person, that is likely, or one of the richest, Alisher Usmanov, as well as his yacht and his private plane. Some other individuals on that list, Emily, his longtime aide. For years, he's worked with him. Dmitry Peskov has been his spokesperson. Then you have individuals like Arkady Rotenberg, and this was a really big story last year when Alexei Navalny, the opposition leader, made this widely viewed YouTube video about the quote-unquote Putin's palace near Sochi that he spent billions on. And that individual came out and said, I'm actually the beneficiary of that. So you can see the kind of individual. These are people that are close to the president, and potentially the U.S. thinks they can change his calculus.
Anne-Marie, there's also a feud or a division that seems to be forming between the White House and Congress about cutting off Russian oil imports. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi said ban it all, ban it now. And what we just heard from the press secretary, Jen Psaki, today is that they're not ready to do that because they don't think strategically it makes sense. When you have less oil supply in the market, that means prices go up. And Emily, that gets to the heart of what this administration is challenged at home, and which is in higher inflation, higher gasoline prices. By and large, the U.S. imports about 600,000 barrels of Russian crude, maybe about 8% when you consider all the other products as well, not just hardcore barrels of crude. But the issue right now is, Emily, is that that's actually probably much less because refiners are shunning it all on their own. They don't want to be seen buying these assets.
All right, Emery Horton for us at the White House. Emery, thank you so much for all of those updates. Coming up, Ukraine is home to a deep bench of tech talent, developers that support tech companies around the world. We're going to talk to two of them next and take you to Western Ukraine, where one engineer is helping to keep his team safe across the country. This is Bloomberg. Despite the relentless onslaught of Russian forces, Ukraine's vital tech sector is still operating for clients around the world. While Ukraine's own tech leaders are helping support the war effort and working around the clock to keep their own employees safe, I want to bring in two of those tech leaders now. Lasha Antadaz, the co-founder of the NFT API platform Rarify, as well as Pavel Kravchenko, founder of the Blockchain Expertise Center Distributed Lab, who just helped some of his team members get out of the city in Kharkiv. Pavel, I know you are in Western Ukraine right now, so you're holding up your phone in front of your face where you are hunkered down. I would love for you to talk to us about what you're experiencing there. I know you're in a city called Uzgrut, which has been quieter till now. How are you doing, and what is the situation there?
Yeah, the situation is okay. But, 7 days ago, I woke from the rockets and explosions in Kyiv. So that was like an experience. And still, big part of my team is experiencing this in Kharkiv. The Kharkiv was all over the news because Russians are demolishing the city. So today, yesterday, tomorrow, we are evacuating the team and also people who are in big need.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about what you're experiencing. And obviously, my heart goes out to you and your team. Lasha, I know you left Ukraine for safety in Georgia a few weeks ago, but you still have almost 24 employees and developers still in the Ukraine. What are they telling you right now?
So definitely, as you can see, I'm trying to manage it from outside of the country, and it's a kind of a challenge as well. But I want to actually thank the community internally and Pavel and his team, because there's a huge coordination among the developer community, and in terms of even evacuating and living and coordinating this process. And overall, what we've seen inside is a huge help, because the chats that were used previously for inviting the greatest speakers in Ukraine and really showing what we were building are now kind of coordination chats in terms of who needs what, and that's a huge help, especially for me who's outside and trying to manage all that and get on hand.
Pavel, I know you're working around the clock to help your employees get to safer places. How hard is it to get out? Talk to us about the logistical challenges that you're dealing with. I know they are, first of all, leaving everything they know. It is incredibly costly. They won't have access necessarily to a consistent supply of food or medication.
Basically, there are a few challenges. You have this shortage of taxi drivers, so anybody who can deliver anything. And the prices went up 50 times. So for normal people, it's just impossible to pay. For IT people, it's still possible, but it's a very expensive operation. And plus the martial laws, like you cannot stay outside after 6, or in some cities after 4, and your logistics need to be finished before, so the day starts at 6 a.m. In some places, like one developer just called me, said I need a way out because our home has no electricity, has no heat, has no gas, because it was bombed, and so he needs to escape tomorrow. So this type of stuff we have right now, like Kharkiv is under like heavy fire. There are some other cities that are even worse, like Mariupol and Kherson. But Kharkiv is a very big city. It's like 1.5 million, and approximately like 50,000 developers were there. So the business is obviously disrupted. But our clients are supporting us. They're sending us money to donate, because we're donating to people who are in need, for whom like $30 is like a fortune currently to buy like bread. But not everything you can buy with money. That's the truth that comes when you are in war. The money doesn't save you.
Lasha, I know that you are working to support your developers on the ground, and there has been an incredible means of internal communication in the way that you've all come together. How are you organizing? How often is this a minute by minute, second by second thing?
Well, like the first thing that comes is like every morning you wake up and try to figure out what happened. So this is the most kind of strange moment when you wake up and you don't know what happened over the hours that you were asleep, and trying to like individually and into the group chats find out who's how, who the bombs that were seen, like how close they were to the places they spent the night. And this coordination is like I don't know, a couple of times over the day, and especially when somebody leaves and tomorrow like some of the developers are going to leave it's a kind of challenge. So is it going to happen? What time will they be able to get to the other cities? So there's a lot of risks and uncertainty, and I'm trying to keep the momentum of controlling and understanding who's at what stage.
Pavel, I understand some of your employees have expressed wanting to fight for your country. Are they taking up arms? Are you being asked to fight?
Actually, there are lots of people who want to fight, and if you don't have an experience, they will not let you. So like many companies were kind of afraid that their people will be drawn to army, but actually that's very little amount of unexperienced people will go there. But yes, they it's a very patriotic like spirit here, because it's our land and they just bombed that. And surprisingly, like Kharkiv was always considered like, they speak Russian, and it was kind of friendly city. And now Russia demolishes it like more than other cities, and that's kind of made people like wonder like that what they supported in the past was really kind of not good. So that's therefore more and more people are willing to go to the army, and I know many people who come from abroad to fight, like Ukrainians that came from abroad. So that's the situation, basically.
And
so everybody's helping. Like I have Facebook.
Your wife, I understand, is there with you and isn't leaving the country, but she's making supplies for the army. Can you tell us about that decision, deciding to stay rather than leave when leaving could be safer?
Like we're all in the same boat. So like if you leave your home once, then you leave your home twice, then third time, so that will never end. Like the apartments that were bombed day before yesterday, I was living in the same area in 2 apartments. And one of them I sold to the guy who moved from Donetsk. And Donetsk was already, heavily destroyed when separatists came there and now like Kharkiv. So like that's the fate. If you move another time, then they'll come and take something from there. Like surprisingly, we have a Georgian like Lasha here, and Georgia experienced this twice with Abkhazia and South Ossetia. So like, yeah, it will never stop if you don't fight.
The Ukrainian government has been so crypto forward, accepting crypto donations, and I know that you have experience in blockchain and NFT technology. Lasha, you know, some of the way that the Ukrainian government has been able to accept these donations, to come up with this idea to auction off digital assets has been pretty incredible. What is it about Ukraine and the deep bench of tech talent there, like yourself, that's enabled the country to do this?
Definitely. So Ukraine is one of the greatest countries and people who are like tech savvy, especially into so-called Web3 and blockchain space, and especially Pavel, his team, and like the entire network crypto community, as we call each other, that has been like super strong, like both like in building products for like on a global level and really outsourcing. It has been the massive force of outsource for the Western companies to build out this new web. But I can proudly say that the same community is like building and fighting at the same time, and we're going to continue doing until we win. And the crypto has like become like a widely used thing even before the war, and now it's helping a lot to fund the campaigns and fund the people who are in need for that, and the government like really enabling the crypto donations and the community assisting that. So more than 30 million, as I know by the last statistics, have been mobilized over that, and that shows like how big the crypto community and support from the outside is of that particular space and industry.
Well, it has been incredibly powerful to hear your story, to hear how you are fighting to keep your employees safe and continuing to work and run your companies. Thank you for taking the time to share your stories with us, Lasha Antaz and Pavel Kravchenko. We hope that you stay safe. All right. Coming up, we're going to head to Singapore. I'm going to speak with the president of Grab, Ming Ma, about how the company continues to push towards profitability as the pandemic drags on. That is next. This is Bloomberg. The effects of the pandemic still being felt. Grab, Southeast Asia's ride-hailing and delivery giant, reporting mounting losses in its latest earnings results, losing more than $1 billion for the quarter. Joining me now, Ming Ma, president of Grab. Ming, you are, of course, based in Singapore, which just announced rare unilateral sanctions on Russia. What do you think of Singapore's response so far and how the world community is really rallying against Russia?
Hey, Emily. First of all, thank you for very much for having me on here. It goes without saying that our hearts just absolutely go out to everyone that's been affected. We do have a few grabbers that's also been affected in the region, and we're doing everything that we can. I would say you're absolutely right. The COVID impact has been severe. We're seeing potential impacts from a global basis. And frankly, despite that, I think we feel very happy with a lot of the performance that we've achieved. In spite of all the city lockdowns, in spite of all the macro turmoil, I think 2021 was our best year ever. We exceeded guidance on GMV. Revenues grew by 44%, and we delivered against our EBITDA guidance. In terms of Southeast Asia, it's clear that our super app strategy is working. Our users are spending more. Customers from our 2016 cohort are now spending close to 5 times what they spent when they first joined Grab. And our retention rates are now up to 74% for customers that use 3 or more services from Grab. We are generating solid margins and mobility, and we are focused on building value over the long term and just really unlocking the tremendous market opportunity that we see here. And we are convicted that the position that we've taken in our strategy as the only regional super app is the right one for us.
How are you thinking about delivery and ride-hailing workers in Southeast Asia at this time? Many of them are part-time workers. They have little rights. How are you factoring that into the future of the company?
Well, the key for us has always been around how do we create true economic empowerment for micro entrepreneurs across Southeast Asia. And these micro entrepreneurs certainly include our driver partners, it includes many of the restaurant partners that we work with in food delivery. And the key for us is how do we provide the largest income opportunities for drivers, for merchants over time. And the key aspect for that is executing on our super app strategy. It's about cross-sell, selling multiple services to our consumers, and over time generating increased wallet share for our consumers. And I think that's the best way for us to continue empowering economic stability for the region here.
Now, the war in Ukraine is only escalating. As we've been discussing, there's concern it could lead to rising food prices. It'll certainly make supply chain issues potentially worse. How is Grab potentially impacted by that and preparing for that?
Yeah, well, we're obviously monitoring the situation pretty closely. It's a little bit too early to really tell how the effects will ripple through Southeast Asia. We're monitoring gas prices, oil prices as it relates to our drivers, because that certainly hits the driver P&Ls in a very direct way. We're also monitoring food costs and the effects of inflation across Southeast Asia. But if I just step back for a second, the real key for us as a platform is how do we provide the lowest cost services to our merchants, our drivers, and to our consumers. And ultimately, if we're able to do that, then I think the sustainability will be on the platform. I just want to give a quick example. When you look at our total segment adjusted EBITDA margins, we've improved those by 50% from 2020 to 2021. From a minus 2% loss in 2020 to minus 1% in 2021. And I think a large part of that is by driving continued cost reductions in the platform, which ultimately we then share with all of our partners, restaurants, and drivers.
All right. Ming Ma, President of Grab, thank you for joining us. We'll see how Grab continues to weather the COVID storm. Coming up, we're going to look at what it's like fleeing Ukraine from the eyes of those living through it, plus what it's like being a child of war. And later, crypto and the war. We're going to have more on the role of crypto in the Russian invasion and how crypto exchanges can navigate the crisis. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. It's estimated that more than 1 million refugees have left Ukraine as the war has now stretched into its second week, and it's a brutal one. Many fleeing to Poland, leaving behind a cloud of uncertainty on when they can return and what they will be returning to. Bloomberg's Aggie Cantrell is in Poland and spoke to those leaving it all behind.
I saw a lot of damages, a lot of crashes, and I even just I don't see my Kiev as it was earlier.
At the main train station in Przemysl, a border town with Ukraine, Poland is experiencing an influx of refugees from the war just over the other side of their border. We're seeing people who've come from Kiev and Lvov and other parts of the country arrive in Poland, in the EU, and this is something that is happening in a lot of places around the European Union's borders with Ukraine.
It was very, very frightened. We're just here with my son, and my husband stayed in Ukraine and trying to fight. I hope that he will alive, and I hope that he will come here.
I live in Ukraine, my husband, and I come to Poland with my daughter and with my friends. We are going to Germany today, and I don't know how many time we stay there.
We have also heard about people who are not Ukrainian citizens but were living in the country at the time that the war began, discussing the fact that they found it harder to leave the country because they weren't Ukrainian.
It was very, very challenging because I was not Ukrainian, and so even the guys, they were pushing us and they were trying to stop us from entering the train and allowing the Ukrainians to go first. Although I'm from Africa, but I have a wife who is from Ukraine. First, when we arrived at the border of Ukraine, they took my wife and my child away and they told me to wait. So I stood there for about 3 or 4 hours before they called us to come. It was really, really stressful. It took me 2 days to get to Poland. Like, leaving Ukraine was very, very stressful, and I didn't want to leave Ukraine now because all my life is there. My child, everything is we left everything in Ukraine. So I don't know from now, because if the war still continues in Ukraine, I don't know what will happen. And now they are telling us you can only stay 14 days here, and I don't know what to do.
The UNHCR has said that any sort of discrimination against people from third countries would not be acceptable under the Geneva Convention, but that they haven't had confirmation of such things from the authorities. Here we're seeing people who get hot food and SIM cards in order to try and stay in contact with their families back home, and also to try and see what their next steps are, whether they're going to remain in Poland or try and find a new life in some other part of the European Union, whether that be just for now or potentially more permanently.
I hope that we will return soon, because I didn't want to leave. I want to be home, but unfortunately, such a situation. We are hoping that it will end soon.
At this moment, I don't see the opportunity to return.
Bloomberg's Aggie Cantrell there in Poland. Now I want to bring in Ali Partovi, the CEO of NEO, which just launched a new accelerator. I want to get to that in a moment. Ali with me here in the studio. I want to start actually by asking a little bit about your family history, because you grew up during a war in Iran. And I'm so curious, what is it like watching these images and seeing Ukraine under attack?
Yeah, Emily, and thank you for having me here. It's really tough. War is really terrible, and for me it's personal because I was 7 years old when living in Iran when Iraq invaded us, and for the next 5 years, there was just this ever-present sense of fear. And as a child, it's really difficult, not just the fear, but seeing the grown-ups be afraid, seeing your parents be stressed out or anxious, and not knowing what's going to happen next is particularly difficult for children. And I will say, though, on the bright side, my twin brother and I were very lucky because we had a special form of escape. As you know, I've told you in the past, we were amongst the only kids in the country to have a computer, and we learned how to program. And that, for us, was a way to have a way to create our own world, in software that, that we could control and that followed the rules and that was predictable. And that was an enormous comfort for us, to have that. And I would say it helped us get through.
And you both founded a company called Code.org, which I believe you can access anywhere. I mean, do you have any advice for parents and children who are there right now trying to figure out how to pass the days and survive?
It's hard. It's not my place to give advice, but I will say, if I can brag about my brother Hadi a bit, I mean, he has led that organization, Code.org, to have so much impact, and tens of millions of kids worldwide are now able to program, and it is not just a skill that helps them think, but it also helps them cope. In Ukraine alone, 6.5 million kids use Code.org, which out of a country of 44 million, that's a large number, and and having that escape is I'm sure comforting to them. I do also want to, I think we need to mention that this is not the only unjust war going on right now. War is terrible and it really needs to stop. Mm-hmm. But there are also kids coding in Iraq, which has been occupied by the US for 20 years now. and their kids coding on code.org in Yemen, which is being bombed as we speak. And those are wars that I don't think Americans support either, but they're wars that our government has been supporting. And the sad thing is that these kids are innocent, regardless of their skin color or how they were born or where they were born. It's, and it's not fair for them to have to pay some price because of these wars.
Now, I know one of the most important things to you has been to find tech talent, no matter who they are or where they are, and give them the tools to succeed, which is what you're doing at NEO. And you have launched this new accelerator. What is the goal here, and how will it work in the context of other opportunities that exist in the tech industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, my own path was, very much the American dream, in that I came to America with not very much other than the ability to program, and that enabled me, to have this power to create. And being able to program means you can create apps and even build a company. And in my case, I started a company when I was 23 and became successful. And today, kids who are graduating from college with that ability have the potential to create the epochal companies of the future. And we've just announced this program, NEO Accelerator, which is aiming specifically for relatively young engineering leaders, 1 to 4 years out of college, who want to start companies, and to give them both financial support and mentorship to help them build great startups. And it's a program that is a 3-month program that includes a 4-week-long retreat in Oregon to kick it off, where founders of companies will live under the same roof alongside each other and mentors. And it'll culminate at the end of the program with a pitch day, not to raise more money, but to pitch other engineers, to pitch software engineers to join your team to help you with recruiting, because that's one of the toughest problems facing all companies today.
Now, it's been described as the anti-YC, a reference to Y Combinator, which is a long-established accelerator in Silicon Valley that has been operating here for years. What do you think YC is doing wrong, and how will NEO do some of those things differently?
So Y Combinator is an incredible and amazing organization, and it's incredibly inspiring. I would say it's not an exaggeration to say it's one of the most impactful organizations of the 21st century, if you look at all the amazing companies they've spawned. And I don't think they're doing something wrong. It's that as the startup world has expanded and become more and more vibrant, there's room for different, different investors to support different types of companies. And Y Combinator's primary focus, or the culmination of their program, is to help with fundraising. And it appeals to companies who are struggling with fundraising. And as access to capital has become, capital has become more and more abundant in the last couple of years, it hasn't been equally distributed. There are some companies for whom it's really easy to raise funds, and that's, just less relevant to them. And there's others for whom it's more difficult. So Y Combinator today has really shifted to focus on emerging markets, very large and lucrative opportunity, helping countries from Africa, Latin America, et cetera, get access to capital. And it's an amazing business, which is doing really great work. It is less relevant than it used to be for top engineers who are perhaps graduating from American universities or graduating from American tech companies like Google or Stripe or Microsoft, and starting companies, because for them, they don't need help with raising money. It's so easy for them to raise money these days. They need help with other things. And so we're tailoring a program to help them with the things that are their challenges.
Well, we are excited to watch you try to, or start, a new chapter in Silicon Valley history. Ali Partovi, CEO of NEO, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your personal story as well. I appreciate it. Coming up, how crypto exchanges can navigate the war. We're going to be joined by CoinShares to talk about crypto exchanges' responsibility as sanctions keep piling on Russia, and if cryptocurrencies can truly be regarded as a safe haven. That's next. This is Bloomberg. After plunging at the start of the Russian attack on Ukraine, cryptocurrencies have reasserted themselves as a refuge in recent days. But after Bitcoin rallied more than 16% over the last 2 days, it's starting to lose some steam as the possibility of expanding sanctions has been raised to prevent Russians from using cryptocurrencies as a work around restrictions. I want to bring in my next guest to talk about this and much more, Meltem Demirors, the Chief Strategy Officer at CoinShares. Meltem, what do you make of all of this back and forth and up and down? Is Bitcoin really a safe haven or not?
Yeah, it's great to be here. I wish it were under better circumstances. I think this has been a really interesting few weeks. Not only do we have this conflict happening in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, but we also recently had the Canadian truckers and their access to the banking system getting cut off, which again was an instance where there was a lot of conversation around Bitcoin, around cryptocurrency. At the end of the day, I think what we're seeing here is a growing awareness around the world that for the first time, people, right, citizens who really are the victims of wars that are fought by superpowers, they have a choice. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are non-political global money. And again, we're seeing not only an increase in trading activity in Ukraine and Russia, but also a lot of the trading activities coming from the US as people are looking at what's unfolding around the world. And maybe this is the start of this Bitcoin no longer being a risk on asset, but potentially over time becoming a risk off asset. Now, a couple of weeks is really not enough time for that thesis to play out. But I think in the coming months, in the coming years, we're certainly going to be able to have a lot more data that allows us to more definitively prove that relationship holds over time.
Now, crypto exchanges have said they'll comply with sanctions, but not do a blanket ban on all Russian users. What do you make of how they're navigating this? And can they really differentiate between Russian tycoons, if you will, and everyday Russians?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's a great question. In 2018 is when we saw FinCEN and Treasury issue the first sanction against a Bitcoin wallet address. Now, one of the interesting challenges here is a Bitcoin wallet address is just a string of characters. You can attach it to a person, although there are a lot of tools that allow us to do that. And obviously, anytime you want to interact with the legacy financial system, meaning fiat currencies, which is the money we spend and use, that's the money that oligarchs and tycoons have to use to buy fuel for their jets and their yachts, you're interacting typically with a financial institution, which will do a lot of background checks and gather data on who you are. Now, at the end of the day, I think the stance that many exchanges have taken is they're going to comply with the rules as they're written. And at the end of the day, private citizens in Ukraine and Russia and any part of the world that are not subject to blanket sanctions should be allowed to use these platforms just as they have in the past. And again, anyone who is the subject of an official sanction, anyone who's on an OFAC list will be blocked. Now, what happens in the decentralized side of this is obviously much more challenging to control. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult to move millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars and move them in and out of crypto without touching a legacy financial institution. So again, it's really at those endpoints where we're touching cash, the control is going to be happening.
Now, after raising almost $47 million in donation via cryptocurrency, Ukraine has been so crypto forward and, accessing all of these new technologies. Some of these things would be unheard of here in the United States. They said they would airdrop rewards to those who contributed, though. Then they said they're canceling that, but they're now talking about auctioning off NFTs. What do you make of their use and exploration of these new technologies?
Look, I think it's absolutely incredible. Over 35,000 different wallet addresses have given close to $50 million in direct aid to the government of Ukraine. And in real time, right, with settlement to this wallet address that's owned by the Ukrainian government. Now, in contrast, the country has raised $270 million in war bonds and received $350 million in military aid from the US. So while $50 million is not a huge number, it's a sizable number that can really make a difference. Now, what's really cool about this to me is anyone in the world could give money. This is non-political global money that's transferred on the internet. So anyone with an internet connection, whether they live in Africa, whether they live in Southeast Asia, whether they live in the US, they can send money either via an intermediary or directly via their own wallet. And I think that's really exciting. It brings a lot of transparency as well in terms of where the donations are going. We're not shipping pallets of cash into these countries, which is what's been done in the past in these conflicts, but we're able to confirm with certainty that these funds are going to go to the government. And what's really exciting is in a matter of hours, a decentralized exchange protocol called Uniswap actually was able to spin up a really cool new product that would allow people to convert any token into a donation that would send directly to the Ukrainian government. So the fact that we can do this in hours, I think is incredible. The fact that the crypto community has mobilized around this, I think is incredibly exciting. And again, I think Ukraine's embrace of this is acknowledgement that the world is supporting the people of Ukraine. The world wants to help. And whether they get a token or an NFT indicating their support, we buy things all the time. People buy poppies on Remembrance Day. People buy bumper stickers to denote their support of specific causes. In the digital world, right, on the internet, we might buy NFTs or we might donate to get a digital token that indicates our support of a cause.
Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm in helping us put all of this into context. It has been amazing to watch the way that Ukraine has taken advantage of this new technology and how the world has responded. Meltem Demir is Chief Strategy Officer at CoinShares. Thank you for joining us. Coming up, an about face for Rivian after being hit with a number of cancellations this week. More on that up next. This is Bloomberg. Shares of electric pickup maker Rivian dropping to another record low Thursday after the startup U-turned on a decision to raise prices for pre-order customers. The backtrack just 48 hours after the company first announced it would boost the price of its R1T pickup by 17% and its R1S SUV by 20%. Joining us now, Ed Ludlow, who covers Rivian. Ed, where do we stand now? Are the prices rising or not?
Yeah, so the prices are rising if you make an order today. So anyone that was a pre-order customer or put their order in before March the 1st will pay the original prices. You know, there were a number of cancellations. I spoke with Rivian. They wouldn't tell me how many, but you can find a number of upset customers on Twitter. So, you know, when they first launched this product, the price of the pickup truck, for example, was $67,500. If you ordered before March the 1st at any time in the last couple of years, you'll pay that price. But going forward, as an example with the R1T, you're paying 17% more, almost $80,000. It's a big jump.
I still don't understand why they thought they could raise the prices on people who had ordered something, you know, potentially as many as 2 years ago. But okay, I mean, there is some broader significance here beyond customers being upset, which I do understand. Talk to us about why this really matters.
Well, it's a great point. You saw that quote there from the CEO, RJ Scaringe. He wrote this letter to customers basically saying that this is supply problems, right? Semiconductor shortage, rising input costs. Look at what's happening in global commodities markets. They had to do something, but they just got it wrong in the way they went about it, making it relevant to pre-order customers. Remember, this is a company that had the 6th biggest IPO in history. It has billions of dollars on its balance sheet at its disposal, but it's years away from profitability, years away from being cash flow positive. So this really matters. You know, Joe Spack at RBC calculated that by backtracking, they're leaving about $850 million of potential revenue on the table when you take into account the worst case scenario of cancellation. So this is really meaningful, but it's a classic hiccup for a company that's grown really big, really fast, but isn't really building that many trucks yet.
How do you think the higher prices will impact demand, Ed, quickly?
Great question. Because we don't know who they're competing with, right? Which are they going after Tesla? Well, Tesla has lower price points. Are they going after the premium segment or trying to go to traditional pickup buyers? Remember, you know, Rivian kind of bills itself as the Patagonia of the EV world for adventurers, explorers. So this is a question going forward, how relevant these products will be with customers.
All right. Ed Ludlow, thanks for bringing us that story. We'll see how that continues to fall out. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We're going to be joined tomorrow by Jesse Powell, CEO Kraken himself, to talk about the rise in crypto during the war, the impact of sanctions, and their approach. You don't want to miss that conversation. He's been pretty active on Twitter about this. We'll be back with that tomorrow. I'm Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg.